Summary of the poem There's a Certain Slant of Light by Emily Dickinson. There's a Certain Slant of Light by Emily Dickinson describes the feeling of heaviness and sadness brought on by a particular kind of light seen during winter afternoons. This light feels oppressive and affects the speaker's emotions deeply. Dickinson compares it to the heft of cathedral tunes, suggesting it is both heavy and filled with a sacred but sorrowful power. The light causes a heavenly hurt, a kind of pain that leaves no physical mark but creates an invisible, internal change that is hard to describe. The poem explains that this feeling cannot be taught or easily understood by others. It is called the seal despair, as though despair has left a permanent, inescapable mark. The speaker sees it as a force sent by the air itself. When this light appears, the world seems to stop, the landscape listens, and shadows hold still, reflecting the deep emotional impact. When the light leaves, it feels like the distant, quiet presence of death, leaving behind a lasting effect. The poem has 4 stanzas, each with 4 lines. It follows an ABCB rhyme scheme, where the second and fourth lines rhyme. The rhythm alternates between 3-beat and 4-beat lines, creating a reflective, musical flow. This structure mirrors the meditative tone of the poem, enhancing its exploration of internal emotional struggles. The theme centers on the intangible yet powerful effect of despair, brought on by a moment in nature. Dickinson portrays this despair as unavoidable and deeply transformative. The light, along with the imagery of death and distance, emphasizes how fleeting moments in nature can profoundly shape our inner lives, blending beauty and pain in a haunting way.
Line-by-line explanation of the poem There's a Certain Slant of Light by Emily Dickinson.
Line 1. There's a certain slant of light. In this opening line, the speaker introduces a specific kind of light, one that seems to have a unique and significant effect on the observer. The phrase certain slant suggests an angle, emphasizing that this light is distinct, perhaps unusual, and holds a special quality that distinguishes it from other types of light. Line 2. Winter afternoons. The light described in the first line is associated with winter afternoons. The mention of winter suggests coldness, barrenness, and a lack of warmth, both physically and emotionally. Winter afternoons are often low light, muted, and tinged with a sense of quiet or melancholy, adding to the mood set by the first line. Line 3. That oppresses, like the heft. This certain slant of light is described as oppressive. The word oppresses conveys the heaviness and emotional burden it brings. The comparison to the heft suggests that the light carries weight, not in a literal sense, but in an emotional or psychological way that feels difficult to bear. Line 4. Of cathedral tunes. The speaker compares this oppressive light to the heft of cathedral tunes. Cathedral tunes, often solemn and grand, have a sacred and heavy atmosphere. This comparison implies that the emotional weight of the light is not just burdensome, but also carries a certain reverence, much like the music played in a cathedral. It evokes a sense of awe, yet it is also associated with sadness or solemnity. Line 5. Heavenly hurt it gives us. The light is described as inflicting heavenly hurt. The juxtaposition of heavenly with hurt suggests that the pain caused by this light is not earthly or mundane, but transcendent and spiritual. It feels profound and deeply emotional, as though it originates from a higher, almost divine source. Line 6. We can find no scar. Despite the pain caused by the light, there is no visible wound or scar. The hurt is not physical, it is emotional or psychological. This line emphasizes that the impact of this light is internal, a shift within the person that cannot be seen, but is felt. Line 7. But internal difference? The pain or hurt results in an internal difference. This suggests a subtle but significant change in the person affected, one that is not external but deep within. The person experiences a shift in their perspective, emotions, or understanding that alters them internally. Line 8. Where the meanings are. This internal change affects the way the person understands life or meaning. The phrase "where the meanings are" indicates that this internal difference shapes the person's deeper comprehension of the world, perhaps making them more attuned to the complexities of life, suffering, and existential questions. Line 9. None may teach it, any. The experience of this heavenly hurt is something that cannot be taught to others. It is a personal and unique experience that cannot be conveyed through words or instruction. This suggests that such emotional or spiritual affliction is something that can only be understood through personal experience. Line 10. 'Tis the seal despair. The light, with its accompanying pain, is described as the seal of despair. Despair is presented as an affliction that marks the person, leaving an indelible impression. The use of seal implies something permanent, as though despair has branded the individual, making it an inescapable part of their emotional or spiritual state. Line 11. An imperial affliction. Despair is further described as imperial, suggesting that it is all-powerful, overwhelming, and commanding. The word imperial implies authority, as though despair rules over the individual with the force and grandeur of an empire. It is not something the person can control or escape. Line 12. Sent us of the air. Despair is described as sent us of the air, which suggests that it is an external force, one that comes from an intangible, almost ethereal source. This idea of despair being sent of the air implies that it is beyond the person's control, almost as if it is a divine or natural affliction that cannot be avoided or predicted. Line 13. When it comes, the landscape listens. When this light, and the emotional burden it carries, appears, the entire landscape listens. The personified landscape suggests that the world around the speaker becomes still and attentive, as though it recognizes the presence of this profound emotional experience. Nature itself seems to acknowledge the weight of the speaker's emotional state. Line 14. Shadows hold their breath. The shadows are described as holding their breath, indicating a sense of suspension, tension, or waiting. This line enhances the stillness that envelopes the scene, suggesting that the entire environment is in a state of quiet anticipation or awe in the presence of this emotional heaviness. Line 15. When it goes, 'tis like the distance. When the light and its emotional burden leave, it is compared to the distance. This distance conveys a sense of emptiness or separation, as if something profound has been lost or is no longer within reach. The emotional departure is marked by a feeling of detachment, as though the speaker has been distanced from something essential. Line 16. On the look of death. The final line compares the departure of the light to the look of death. The phrase evokes the idea that the emotional effect of the light is so powerful and intense that its absence feels like the cold finality of death. The look of death implies an irreversible change, and the speaker conveys that the experience of this emotional burden is akin to confronting something deeply unsettling and final.
About the poet. Emily Dickinson, born on December 10, 1830, in Amherst, Massachusetts, is one of the most celebrated American poets. Known for her reclusive lifestyle, she spent much of her life in her family home, often avoiding social interactions and devoting herself to writing. Despite her solitude, Dickinson's poetry reveals a profound engagement with themes of nature, death, immortality, love, and spirituality. Her unique style, marked by unconventional punctuation, slant rhyme, and compressed language, was ahead of its time. During her lifetime, only a few of her nearly 1,800 poems were published, often heavily edited to conform to conventional standards. Dickinson's works were rediscovered posthumously, gaining recognition for their originality and depth. Her introspective and thought-provoking poetry has solidified her legacy as a pioneer of modern American literature, influencing countless poets and readers worldwide. She passed away on May 15, 1886, leaving behind a remarkable literary treasure.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.